pity arrived before the appetizers. It came in the form of my aunt's hand, placed over mine on the white tablecloth, with the particular gentle pressure of someone delivering condolences at a funeral that hasn't happened yet. Her eyes held the warm, liquid expression of a woman who has decided that sympathy is the most useful thing she can offer. "We just worry about you, sweetheart," she said. "That's all. We all do." Around the long table, 22 members of the Hargrove family arranged themselves into the various postures of people who agree, but have decided that someone else should be the one to say it. My uncle nodded slowly. My cousin Derek studied his water glass. My mother's sister Patricia, who had driven 4 hours from Savannah specifically for this dinner, folded her hands in front of her with the solemn composure of someone attending a mediation. My mother sat at the head of the table and said nothing, which was how she said everything. "We're not criticizing," my aunt continued. "We just, after everything that's happened this past year, we thought it would be good to get together, check in, make sure you're," a pause carefully selected to carry maximum weight, "managing." 22 people waited to hear whether I was managing. My name is Simone Hargrove. I am 34 years old. And this is the story of the night my family gathered to pity me, at a restaurant where every single member of staff knew exactly who I was. I should tell you what had happened this past year, since my family had apparently convened an entire dinner around it. 14 months ago, my marriage had ended, not dramatically. Not with screaming, or betrayal, or the kind of cinematic collapse that at least offers a narrative to hold on to. It had ended quietly, over the course of several months of honest conversation between two people who had discovered, with mutual sadness and without malice, that they had built their life together around a version of themselves that neither of them still was. Marcus and I had separated in March. The divorce was finalized in September. We remained with the particular careful warmth of two people who genuinely respect each other, on terms that most divorced couples would find improbable. My family had not received this nuance. What they had received filtered through my mother's phone calls to her sisters' phone calls to their children. The long chain of family communication that transformed specific events into general narratives was that Simone's marriage had failed, that Simone was alone, that Simone, who had always been the one who did things differently, the one whose choices were difficult to follow, the one who had moved to Chicago at 26 and built something that nobody quite understood, was now, presumably, in pieces. They had not called to ask whether I was in pieces. They had assembled to observe the pieces and offer appropriate comfort. The restaurant was called Harrow. It occupied a converted printing factory in the West Loop, soaring ceilings, original industrial windows, a kitchen visible behind glass, where the press floor had once been. It had opened 18 months ago, to the kind of critical reception that people in the hospitality industry spend entire careers hoping for and rarely receive. The food critic for the Tribune had used the phrase, "once in a decade." The James Beard Committee had taken notice. The reservation list ran 6 weeks minimum on weekends. My family had gotten a table on a Thursday evening because my cousin Derek worked in commercial real estate and had a client relationship with someone who knew someone. He had mentioned this twice before we were seated, which told me what it had cost him in favors. He did not know, none of them knew, that he could have called me directly and had any table in the building on any night with 4 hours' notice. He did not know that the leather-bound menus currently being placed in front of 22 Hargrove family members had been designed by a branding firm I had personally selected. He did not know that the kitchen visible through the glass was operating under financial and operational systems my firm had built and continued to support. He did not know that Harrow Hospitality Group, the parent entity whose name appeared on the restaurant's licensing, tax filings, and lease agreements, was mine. I had owned Harrow since before it opened. The concept had come from Chef Dominic Reyes, a 40-year-old culinary talent who had spent 12 years working in other people's kitchens and had arrived at my office with a business plan that was visionary in its food philosophy and entirely unprepared for the financial reality of launching a flagship restaurant in one of the country's most competitive dining markets. I had spent 3 months evaluating the concept, the numbers, the location, the operator. Then I had structured a partnership that gave Dominic full creative control and gave my firm the operational and financial architecture that would allow his vision to actually function in the real world. Harrow was, 18 months later, the most celebrated restaurant in Chicago. My family was having dinner inside it to discuss whether I was managing. The Pitied tour had been underway for approximately 25 minutes by the time the appetizers arrived. It followed a structure I recognized, the same structure that family interventions have followed since families existed. Individual check-ins designed to establish baseline concern, gentle probing, questions whose real purpose was to confirm that the concern was warranted. Strategic deployment of comparison. Cousin Alicia's stable marriage mentioned with the careful casualness of a woman placing a document on a table. Derek's recent promotion surfaced and allowed to float above the conversation like weather. My mother had still not spoken directly to me. She spoke around me, to her sisters, to my uncle, in the general direction of the table, in the way she communicated when she was feeling something she had not yet decided how to articulate. I knew this pattern. I had been reading it my entire life. "She's been through a lot," my mother said to her sister Patricia, in a tone pitched just low enough to be technically private, and just loud enough to be practically audible. "I just want to make sure she has support." "Of course," Patricia said, looking at me with the expression she might have used for a wounded animal encountered on a hiking trail. Concerned, gentle, maintaining a careful distance. I cut a piece of bread. I want to be clear, genuinely fine. The divorce had been hard in the specific way that the ending of a real thing is hard. Not because it was a failure, but because it was a loss. And losses require time and honesty, and the willingness to sit with discomfort rather than resolve it prematurely. I had done that work. I was doing it still. I had a therapist I respected, a best friend named Camille, who had spent approximately 70 collective hours on the phone with me across the previous 14 months, and a firm I was building with the focused attention of someone who has decided that work, done with intention, is one of the most reliable forms of healing available. I was managing extraordinarily well. I simply had no mechanism, sitting at this table, to communicate that in a way my family's current narrative could accommodate. It was Derek who shifted the dynamic, not intentionally. Derek was a well-meaning man whose primary flaw was an enthusiasm for the sound of his own expertise that occasionally outpaced his awareness of his audience. "This place is unbelievable," he said, looking around the dining room with the satisfaction of someone who had delivered an experience. "You know what it took to get this reservation? My client's been coming here since it opened. Says it's the best restaurant in the city, maybe in the Midwest." He picked up his wine glass. "This is what success looks like. You want to know what success looks like? It looks like this." He gestured broadly at the restaurant. I looked at my wine glass. Camille, who had flown in from New York, specifically because I had called her 3 days before and said, with the flatness of someone trying to be honest about their own needs, that I did not want to go to this dinner alone, was sitting to my left. I felt rather than saw the slight shift in her posture, the microscopic adjustment of someone who knows something no one else at the table knows and is deciding whether to let events unfold or intervene. I touched her wrist lightly under the table. Not yet. Derek, my aunt said, tell Simone about the acquisition, the one in River North. The conversation migrated toward Derek's professional life. I ate my appetizer. I asked my uncle about his garden. I spoke with my younger cousin about her graduate program and found genuinely that I was interested in what she was studying, and then the kitchen door opened. Dominic Reyes did not typically come out of the kitchen during service, for any reason short of a fire or a medical emergency. This was not a rule I had set. It was simply the natural consequence of a man whose relationship with his kitchen was total. During service hours, the kitchen was the only room that existed. The dining room was separate territory managed by his front-of-house team, and the boundary between them was one of the organizational features of Harrow that I had specifically noted as a mark of a well-run operation. He came out that Thursday because I had texted him when I arrived. Just 4 words. Here, with my family. He had understood what that meant in the way that people understand things when they know you well enough to read the space between your words. He came out of the kitchen in his whites. He crossed the dining room with the directness of a man who knows every square foot of a space he helped design. He was followed, I noticed, by 3 members of the front-of-house team, his floor manager, the sommelier, and the assistant manager who handled private events, all of whom had, apparently, coordinated this. In the 30 seconds between my text and their emergence from various corners of the restaurant, they stopped at our table. Dominic looked at me with the warm directness of a long-term collaborator. Simone. He said my name with the ease of someone who has said it in boardrooms and construction walkthroughs and late-night operational calls when the numbers needed reading at 11 p.m. I saw you come in, and I wanted to come out personally. He glanced at the table, registering its size, its composition, the particular social texture of a large family dinner. I hope everything is exactly what it should be tonight. It's perfect, Dominic, I said. The lamb was exceptional. I'll tell the kitchen. He paused, then, with the natural ease of someone who sees no reason not to say a true thing, he said, We're grateful you're here. This place exists because of your work. I say that to my team every time we hit a milestone. He looked at the table with the generosity of a man including an audience rather than performing for one. Your family is dining with the person who made this restaurant possible. Behind him, the floor manager, a young woman named Iris, who had been with Harrow since the first week of service, stepped forward slightly. Miss Hargrove, she said, with the specific professional warmth reserved for people whose name is on the ownership documents. We have a small tasting course the kitchen prepared. A thank you for everything you've done for us this past year. We hope you'll allow us. The sommelier stepped forward and refilled my wineglass with something that was not what the rest of the table was drinking. My assistant manager placed a small card beside my plate, a handwritten note from the kitchen team that I would read later, privately, and keep. The table was absolutely silent. 22 members of the Hargrove family were looking at me with expressions that occupied a wide spectrum. From my cousin's open-mouthed recalibration to my aunt's suspended fork to my mother, at the head of the table, who had finally, completely stopped looking at anything except me, Derek set down his wineglass. Simon, he said slowly, you own this restaurant. My firm has the ownership stake, I said. Dominic runs the creative side. I handle the operational and financial architecture. I kept my voice even. Matter of fact. The way I discuss business, because that was how I discuss business. It's a partnership. This restaurant, he said again. The one I got the reservation for, Apple. The one you got the reservation for. I confirmed. What followed was not a triumphant scene. I want to be honest about that because I think the honest version is more interesting than the triumphant one. My family, to their genuine credit, did not perform their recalibration loudly. There was no dramatic reversal, no sudden cascade of apologies for the pity. What happened was quieter, and in its quietness more real. A table of 22 people who had come to dinner to check on someone who was managing, slowly understanding that the managing had been happening on a scale they hadn't thought to look for. My uncle asked, carefully, how long I had been doing this kind of work. I told him. My aunt, the one who had placed her hand over mine and delivered the condolences, asked what my firm actually did in the specific terms of daily work, of what I actually spent my time on. Not the polite version she had always accepted before. The real question, I told her that too. Derek, to his credit, listened to my explanation of the Harrow partnership with the focused attention of someone in commercial real estate, recognizing the structure of a deal he would have been proud to close himself. That's a smart structure, he said finally. Thank you, I said. My mother had still not spoken, not during the staff greeting, not during the tasting course that arrived in 3 beautiful courses from a kitchen that was, Dominic had once told me, operating at the highest level of its capability. Not during my uncle's questions or my aunt's or Derek's. She sat at the head of the table and watched me with an expression I had spent my entire life trying to read and had never quite been able to. After the dessert course, when the table had opened into the looser, warmer conversation of people who have eaten well and been surprised by each other, she appeared at my side. I had not seen her move. She sat in the empty chair to my right. Derek had left to use the restroom, and she looked at me for a moment without speaking. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. I tried, I said. A few years ago, you asked how the real estate work was going, and I started to explain the hospitality investment model. And you told me about Patricia's son's new position at the bank, and we moved on. She was quiet. I didn't know I did that, she said. I know you didn't. I worry about you, she said. That's real. It's not performance, I know that too, I said. But Mom, I need you to worry about me as I actually am, not as the version of me that needs managing. I held her gaze. I'm not in pieces. I'm building something. I've been building something for 8 years. The divorce was hard and real, and I'm working through it. But I am not broken. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she looked at the restaurant, the room, the kitchen behind the glass, the staff moving with the practiced ease of people who know their space. And something shifted in her expression, something that had been held very tightly for a very long time, loosening its grip slightly. This is yours, she said quietly. Part of it, I said. The part that matters structurally. No. She shook her head slightly. I mean, this is yours. This is what you've been doing. She paused. All those years I thought you were floating. Apple. I was building, I said. It looks the same from the outside until it doesn't. She reached over and took my hand, not with the condolence pressure of earlier in the evening. Something different, something that felt, for the first time in a long time, like she was holding the hand of a person she was seeing clearly, rather than a situation she was managing. Show me sometime, she said. The rest of it. What you've built. I'd like that, I said. Harrow is still running. 18 months after opening, the reservation list is still 6 weeks out on weekends. Dominic's second menu cycle received even stronger reviews than the first. We are in early discussions about a second location, a conversation I am approaching with the careful deliberateness I apply to everything. Because excellent things deserve to be expanded only when the conditions are exactly right. My family came to a soft opening event for a new partnership project last fall. My mother arrived early. She stood in the space before the other guests arrived and walked through it slowly. The way she walked through things when she was paying genuine attention. She stopped at a framed photograph I had placed near the entrance. A building early in the Harrow construction, before the printing factory had become what it became. Just concrete and raw space and the skeletal evidence of something being built. "Is this Harrow?" she asked. "Before it was Harrow," I said. "She studied it for a long time. You could see what it was going to be," she said. "Even then, that's the whole job," I said. "Seeing what something can be before it is." She looked at me. "I'm learning that," she said. Outside, Chicago moved through its evening. The particular energy of a city that builds constantly, that tears down and rebuilds and transforms and begins again without ceremony, without waiting for permission. I had learned that from the city. I had learned that from 8 years of doing the work, while people who loved me struggled to see it. I had learned it, finally, completely, in the moment when 22 people went quiet at a dinner table, and a chef walked out of his kitchen to say a true thing simply. The pity had walked in through the front door. The truth had come out of the kitchen, and the truth, as it always eventually does, had won the room.